Welcome to Craving the Heat, where desire takes the lead and every story leaves you wanting more. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments and keep up with our latest naughty stories. The first time Ethan touched my hand, it was so subtle that I might have convinced myself it hadn't happened, if not for the way my breath caught in my throat. We were in the conference room, crowded with staff going over design boards for an upcoming event, when his fingers grazed mine as he passed me a pen. It was nothing. It should have been nothing. I had a ring on my finger after all, a beautiful, simple diamond that Ryan, my fiancé, had chosen after weeks of dropping hints and casually stopping by jewelry stores with me. We were set to marry in 4 months. He was in the thick of seating charts and catering menus, spending his evenings bent over a notebook in our kitchen, humming absently as he worked. I should have been there with him. Instead, I found myself thinking about Ethan's eyes. We'd worked together for almost a year, and he'd always been friendly but professional, until a few weeks ago, when he started leaning in closer during conversations, lingering when no one else was around. There was an energy between us that wasn't supposed to be there. A dangerous undercurrent I didn't know how to stop. The night it began, the office was nearly empty. We'd stayed late finalizing a proposal, and when I finally pushed my chair back, exhausted, he said softly, "You should let me drive you home." I should have said no. I told myself it was just a ride. But as we drove through the quiet streets, the city lights flickering across his face, I realized how much I'd been craving this. Someone looking at me like I was the only person in the world. When we pulled up outside my building, I unbuckled my seatbelt, muttering thanks. But Ethan didn't move to unlock the doors right away. His hand reached over, brushing mine, and I felt the question in the space between us. My heart pounded. "This is wrong," I whispered. "I know," he said. But he didn't take his eyes off me. "Then why do you look like you want me to?" I couldn't answer, because deep down I knew he was right. That night I didn't let him come upstairs. But I thought about him when I lay in bed beside Ryan, who was texting the florist to confirm table arrangements. The guilt was a constant ache, but so was the longing. The next week it happened. A work trip took us out of the city, just the two of us in a quiet seaside hotel. The rain had trapped us inside. Our meetings finished hours ago, and we ended up in his room, sitting across from each other with glasses of wine. We talked about everything. His failed engagement, my fear of marrying too young, the way we both felt like we were living lives we hadn't fully chosen. At some point, I moved to sit beside him on the couch. At some point, our knees touched. At some point, I stopped pretending I wasn't going to kiss him. It wasn't rushed. It was slow, deliberate, like we were both testing the weight of something we knew we couldn't undo. When his hand cupped my face, I didn't think of Ryan. I didn't think of wedding vows or white dresses or flowers. I thought of how warm Ethan's skin felt under my fingertips. We didn't talk about what happened afterward. The next morning, we went back to work as if nothing had changed, but everything had. Every meeting became charged, every glance a secret. At home, Ryan would ask me if I liked the string quartet he'd booked, and I would smile and nod, my mind still in that hotel room. The worst part? I knew Ryan didn't deserve this. He loved me, genuinely, deeply, without question. And yet, when Ethan brushed past me in the office hallway, my body reacted before my mind could catch up. One evening, after another late night at work, I came home to find Ryan on the living room floor, surrounded by wedding invitations he was stuffing into envelopes. He looked up, his eyes lighting when he saw me. "Babe, we're really doing this," he said, grinning. "I can't wait." And I smiled back. The same smile I'd given Ethan hours earlier when his lips brushed mine in the stairwell. It hit me then, sharp and cruel. I was living 2 lives. And sooner or later, one of them would destroy the other. After that night in the hotel, I told myself I could stop any time. That it was just a moment, a mistake born from proximity and timing. But just one time is the lie everyone tells themselves before it becomes a pattern. The truth is, Ethan didn't chase me. He didn't send desperate messages or ask me to choose him. He didn't need to because all it took was a look. That week we worked late again. We were meant to be finalizing a presentation, but the office was empty, our voices hushed in the low hum of the heating system. At one point, I bent over to pick up a file I dropped, and when I straightened, he was standing closer than he should have been. "You're going to ruin me," he murmured, and the worst part? I smiled. We didn't even make it out of the building before it happened again. In the dim stairwell, with the echoes of the city traffic bleeding in through the cracked window, he kissed me like he'd been holding back for weeks. My back was against the wall, my fingers clutching his jacket, and I let it happen. When I got home that night, Ryan was asleep on the couch, his laptop open beside him with an Excel sheet full of wedding costs. I stood there, staring at him, wondering what kind of person I'd become, someone who could come home from kissing another man and still brush the hair from her. Fiancé's forehead the days blurred after that. There were text messages, never explicit, always careful. That somehow felt more dangerous than anything physical. Thinking of you in the middle of a meeting, a photo of the coffee he'd left on my desk, the way he'd pass behind me during work and let his hand brush my waist for the briefest second. It was a slow, constant erosion of the life I built with Ryan. And yet, I couldn't stop. One Saturday, Ryan insisted we go visit the venue. Again, to visualize the big day. It was a renovated barn outside the city, strung with fairy lights and overlooking a meadow that would be green by the time spring came. He walked me through where the altar would be, how he pictured me. Walking down the aisle toward him, his voice was full of hope, of certainty, and all I could think was that Ethan had texted me, "Miss you that morning." The wedding preparations only gave me more opportunities to hide. Dress fittings, florist meetings, errands, all of them became excuses for moments stolen with Ethan. Sometimes it was just talking in his car, the windows fogged up in the cold. Other times, it wasn't just talking, but it wasn't all passion. There were quieter moments that scared me more, like the time he told me about the novel he'd been trying to write for years, but couldn't finish. And I sat there on his couch, listening, feeling like I knew parts of him no one else did. That was when I realized it wasn't just my body that had crossed the line. It was my heart. Then came the night that cracked everything open. Ryan was away for a weekend. Bachelor trip his friends had arranged, and Ethan came over under the pretense of dropping off work files. It was late, the city outside was muffled by snow, and I'd lit a few candles without thinking about how intimate it made the room look. We ended up on the couch, talking, laughing, letting our hands find each other without resistance. At one point, he looked at me, really looked, and said, "You're not going to marry him, are you?" The air between us went still. I opened my mouth to lie, but nothing came out. "I don't know," I finally whispered. He reached up and touched my cheek, his thumb brushing my skin like he was memorizing it. "I wish you did." We didn't talk after that. Not for the rest of the night. But the next day, when Ryan called to say he'd found the perfect song for our first dance, I had to force myself to sound excited. I could hear the happiness in his voice, the trust, and it made my stomach twist until I thought I'd be sick. Something had to give. The closer the wedding came, the harder it was to breathe. My phone was a loaded weapon, each vibration sending a jolt of guilt and adrenaline through me. Sometimes it was Ryan, sending photos of table settings or honeymoon resorts. Sometimes it was Ethan, a simple "can't stop thinking about you" that undid all my carefully constructed walls. I started avoiding mirrors. When I looked at myself too long, I didn't recognize the woman staring back. She had secrets under her skin and her smile, and the way she checked her phone like she was waiting for something. Someone that wasn't her FINCE acute. Ethan, and I stopped pretending we were careful. There was the night I told Ryan I had to work late because a shipment at the office had come in wrong. In reality, I was in Ethan's apartment, my hair still damp from the snow outside, listening to the low crackle of his record player while we sat cross-legged on the floor. He handed me a glass of wine, and when our knees touched, neither of us moved away. "You know you don't have to marry him," he said, as if it were that simple. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You think it's that easy? I've built a life with him. And yet you're here." His voice was soft but certain, like he already knew the truth I wouldn't admit. It wasn't always grand declarations. Sometimes it was just the way. He'd walk me to my car, lingering in the cold until my hands were too numb to fumble with the keys. Sometimes it was a text at midnight that said, "I wish you were here," and me lying in bed beside Ryan, staring at the screen, the pull between. US wasn't logical anymore. It was gravitational. One evening, Ryan and I went to dinner with friends who had been married for years. They spent half the night teasing each other about old arguments, laughing like there were no cracks in their history. I watched them and felt a pang so sharp I had to excuse myself to the restroom. While I was there, my phone buzzed. It was Ethan. "I can't stand not seeing you tonight. I should have deleted it. I should have ignored it." Instead, I replied, "Come by after 11. That night, after Ryan fell asleep, I slipped out of bed and padded quietly to the living room. The moment I opened the door, the cold air rushed in along with him. His hair was messy from the wind, his eyes lit with something raw. He didn't speak, he just closed the door behind him and stood there, looking at me like I was the only thing that mattered. It was reckless. It was wrong, and I didn't stop him. We talked until the first light of morning crept in through the blinds, about the wedding, about fear, about love. Somewhere in that conversation, I realized there was no neat ending to this. Someone was going to get hurt, no matter what I chose. The wedding was 6 weeks away. The invitations had been sent. The dress was hanging in my closet like a promise I wasn't sure I could keep, and yet, every time Ethan touched my hand, I thought about breaking that promise. The days leading up to the wedding blurred into a strange, exhausting double life. In the mornings, I tried on veils and tasted cake samples with Ryan, smiling when he took my hand and told me I was going to be the most beautiful bride in the world. In the evenings, I found myself in Ethan's apartment, where the light was. Dim, and his touch felt like the only real thing in my day. It was dangerous how easy it became. One night, Ryan fell asleep on the couch, football game still playing quietly in the background. I slipped my coat on and left without a sound. Ethan was waiting for me outside his building, leaning against the brick wall with his hands in his pockets like he'd been counting the minutes. "You're freezing," he murmured when I reached. Him pulling me close, wrapping his coat around me. For a moment, I let myself melt into that warmth, ignoring the voice in my head screaming that I didn't belong here. Inside, the air smelled faintly of cedar and the wine he'd just opened. We didn't bother with small talk. He brushed my hair from my face and studied me like he was memorizing every detail. "Tell me you'll call it off," he whispered. I couldn't. My throat tightened, but no words came. Instead, I kissed him. It wasn't a careful kiss. It was the kind you give when you're drowning and you've just found air. His hands held me like I might disappear, and I think part of me wanted to. Disappear from the choices, the guilt, the impossible line I was balancing on. But reality was waiting. The next morning, I was back in our kitchen, pouring coffee while Ryan flipped pancakes, humming some tune under his breath. He looked so content, so unaware. I almost dropped the mud. Then came the bridal shower. My mother beamed as I unwrapped crystal flutes and lingerie, surrounded by friends and family who spoke about love like it was simple, like it was a vow you just kept because you were supposed to. Ethan wasn't there, but I felt it anyway. In the phantom buzz of my phone against my thigh, in the way my heart raced when I imagined him outside the window, watching me smile for pictures. I didn't mean. The tension broke a little over a week later. It was late. I was alone in the apartment, Ryan away on a last-minute business trip. A knock came at the door, soft but deliberate. I opened it, and there was Ethan, looking like he'd fought every reason not to be here. "I can't do this anymore," he said, voice low but urgent. "I can't watch you marry him when you know it's not him you want." I should have sent him away. I didn't. Instead, I stepped aside and let him in. We stood there in the half-light of the living room, neither of us moving at first. Then, as if the air itself pushed us together, his hands were in my hair, and mine were clutching at his shirt dot. It wasn't just attraction anymore. It was desperation, the kind that comes when you realize time is running out. He pulled back, just enough to look at me. Say it, he breathed. I shook my head, afraid of what would happen if I did. The wedding was 3 weeks away, and I didn't know if I could make it that far without breaking everything. The weeks blurred into a haze of fittings, flower arrangements, and guest lists. Ryan was in his element, talking about honeymoon destinations, calling the band to confirm, meeting the officiant. He was building a future brick by brick, one. We had promised each other, and yet every brick felt heavier because I knew where my heart kept drifting. Ethan didn't make it easy. He stopped pretending to be casual. His messages came at odd hours. I saw something today that reminded me of you. Or I can't stand knowing he gets to wake up next to you. He'd never say more than that, but the words clung to me long after. I put my phone down. One night, after a particularly exhausting day of planning, Ryan kissed my forehead and told me he was heading out to meet a friend for drinks. I sat alone in the apartment for a while, the hum of the refrigerator filling. The silence. Then, without deciding, I found myself dialing Ethan. I can't sleep, I said softly. I'll fix that, he replied. 20 minutes later, I was in his building again. We didn't even turn the lights on. He kissed me in the dark hallway, guiding me inside like he'd been waiting by the door. It wasn't hurried this time. It was slow, deliberate, like he was teaching me something I'd forgotten about love. My fingers traced the back of his neck, memorizing the heat of his skin. Stay, he whispered when I pulled away. Just for tonight. I wanted to. But I left before sunrise, the world outside still wrapped in shadows. My heart pounding with the knowledge that I was falling and there was no way back. The closer the wedding came, the harder it became to keep the two worlds from colliding. Ethan started showing up in places he knew I'd be: the coffee shop near my work, the park where I jogged. Sometimes he wouldn't say a word, just look at me with that expression that made my chest ache. One afternoon, he intercepted me outside. A boutique where my mother had dragged me to try on jewelry. Cancel it, he said without preamble. I glanced around, panicked. Ethan, cancel it, he repeated. You don't love him like you love me. And I can't keep pretending I'm okay watching you walk down that aisle. I hated how right he sounded. But Ryan's name was already printed on the invitations. His mother's eyes already shining every time she called to talk about the big day. My life with him was ready, neat, planned. Safe thought my life with Ethan was nothing but fire. The night before the rehearsal dinner, it all came apart. Ryan was out late again, finalizing something for work, he said. I was in bed, half reading, when I heard a knock. My stomach dropped. It was Ethan. He looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept in days. I had to see you, he said. I opened the door wider without thinking. He stepped inside and the air shifted, heavy, charged. I can't lose you, he said, voice low. And tomorrow, when I'm sitting in that church pretending I'm just another guest, I'll know I lost you forever. Unless you choose me right now. I froze. The space between us was electric. My pulse roared in my ears. If I stepped forward, I knew what it would mean. If I turned away, I'd never see him again. Not like this. I didn't step forward. I didn't turn away. I just stood there, breathing him in, feeling the weight of the choice pressing down on me. And that's where I realized something terrifying. It didn't matter what I chose. Either way, I was going to break someone. The knock still echoed in my chest long after Ethan stepped inside. He stood just a few feet away, his shoulders tight, his jaw set like he was holding back everything he wanted to say. You're shaking, he murmured, brushing his knuckles against mine. I hadn't realized I was until that moment. The touch was featherlight, but it unraveled me. You shouldn't be here, I whispered. I know, his voice cracked, but I couldn't let the night end without seeing you. I can't let tomorrow happen without telling you that I love you. The words stopped my breath. I felt them in his touches, in the way he looked at me like I was something fragile but unstoppable. But hearing him claim them was different. I love you too. I admitted barely above a whisper. That was all it took. He stepped forward and pulled me into him, his arms wrapping around me like he'd been waiting a lifetime. I buried my face against his neck, breathing him in, every nerve in my body aware that this was dangerous, wrong, impossible, and yet it felt more right than anything had in years. We moved together without speaking, the world outside falling away. His lips found mine, slow and searching at first, then deeper, hungrier, as though both of us knew this could be the last time. My fingers tangled in his hair. His hands splayed across my back, keeping me close as if he was afraid I'd disappear. It wasn't hurried. We weren't stealing, we were surrendering. Every kiss carried the weight of months of glances, near misses, and unspoken promises. He touched me like he wanted to remember every inch of me, like he was committing me to memory in case tomorrow I walked away for good. When we finally broke apart, we just stood there, foreheads pressed together, breathing hard. Run away with. And he said. My heart lurched. Ethan, no more hiding. No more pretending. We get in my car tonight and just drive until the world can't find us. We'll figure the rest out later. I wanted to say yes. God, I wanted to say yes. My future with Ryan was safe, solid. But with Ethan, it was alive. I closed my eyes, feeling tears threaten. If I do this, there's no going back. Then don't go back, he said, and kissed me again, not like a question this time, but like an answer. 2 hours later, my wedding dress still hung in its garment bag, untouched. My phone lay face down on the table, buzzing with messages I didn't read. Ethan's hand was in mine as we slipped out into the night, the city lights blurring through the car windows. We didn't have a plan, and maybe we didn't need one. We had the hum of the tires on the road, the quiet laughter between stolen glances, and the warmth of his fingers brushing over mine every few minutes, like he needed to make sure I was still there. At dawn. We stopped by the ocean. The waves crashed. Against the shore, the sky bleeding pink and gold. I stood barefoot in the sand, his jacket around my shoulders, and he came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. This, he murmured into my hair, is how our life starts. I turned to face him, the wind tangling my hair, and kissed him, not with urgency this time, but with the quiet certainty that I had chosen him. That despite the chaos we'd left behind, we had something worth risking everything for. And as the sun rose, painting the horizon in light, I knew that I wasn't running anymore. I was exactly where I was meant to be, in his arms, in his love, in the story we were going to write together.